So hello. Good morning. I know I've seen some of you already in this theatre, but we're now into our second morning session. We've got also a fantastic afternoon planned. All the afternoon is going to be happening in that theatre through there. But for the next, I think, hour and a half-ish, you'll be in here with me. Do stick around. We've got some fantastic sessions coming up. But for now, I'm really, really chuffed to be interviewing Luke and Kelly. Luke O'Connell is the Head of Data and Technology at Danone, and Kelly Parker is the Chief Operating Officer at Wavemaker. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
So we're going to be talking about what's your digital carbon footprint. And could we just kick it off, Luke, if I come to you first. What is the carbon impact of our digital marketing activity?
It's really huge, and we're only just starting to really understand it. I guess this is an area that's new for all of us, and we're starting to see some quite scary stats coming out of it. And for good reason, when we haven't been super focused on this in the past. So we've been really focused on physical sustainability, and only recently have we really started thinking, okay, this is becoming a big deal, and this is the next frontier, right? So this is something we don't want to fast forward 10 years and suddenly realize that we've caused a lot of damage because we haven't paid attention to it. Yeah. So the time to act is now, to start thinking about it. And it's a challenge because nobody's thinking about it. So it's definitely a new field.
And Kelly, what would be your take on that?
Yeah, well, the good news is we are thinking about it, right? At Group M, at Wavemaker, at all the agencies, it's very much top of our agenda. And I think, we are one of the only holding groups that actually have put media, of which obviously digital media is a large proportion, at the heart of our net zero commitment. And I think it's a massive industry myth that digital is a better platform or better activities for reducing our carbon footprint. Actually, pound for pound, digital display, digital video actually emits more carbon emissions than any other media. So as Luke said, it's absolutely something that we should be thinking about it. But it's complicated, right? Because you've got to balance performance and responsibility in the same breath.
We've obviously got a lot of brands in the room today, so and we're called the future of brands, so it makes sense to talk about brands. How can brands introduce more sustainable digital marketing practices and at the same time balance that with improving the customer experience?
I think it's a good question. I think there are various different accreditations that you can get after. So things like B Corp, and we're actually lobbying B Corp at the moment to start thinking about sustainability, digital sustainability as a topic. And
Danone is one of the biggest B Corps, isn't it?
Absolutely. All of our brands are accredited, so we're quite unusual to have such a large range of brands, but actually they've all been accredited by the B Corp body. So I guess we're trying to lobby them, but it helps because you're in that space anyway. You're having that dialogue with them, and really we're helping them shape some of their kind of future thinking on, what does this mean? And just for really early days, just initial conversations, but it's enough to start the ball rolling. So I think that's something absolutely that you can do, and you can also work with great partners that ask you the right questions. That just go, when we go into meetings, we're talking about either carbon offsetting or reducing carbon, or how it will how our campaigns would affect the world around us, and that's important. You need partners to be on the same page and talk to you about that. Yeah. Which I think we've got some more to talk about as well.
And there's lots of stuff as well that obviously Danone are doing digitally around sort of how they're storing data, and from the server perspective and putting things into the cloud, which obviously reduces the energy usage and the like. So there's lots of stuff that you guys are doing from a brand perspective, which is brilliant. But I think it's that balance again, isn't it? Everything's always a balance, and these are the things we end up talking often for hours in meetings about, is that balance between, what are the activities that we need to do that will progress our performance on our campaigns and improve our brand image or awareness or whatever those objectives are, versus our social responsibility to make sure that we're not making the planet heat up and eventually go boom, which none of us obviously want to be kind of part of. And there's lots of activities that we're all working towards, things like the personalisation of creative, or big sort of content projects where we've got influencers creating loads and loads of content, and the more and more content that's being produced, the more and more we're adding emissions through the activities that we're doing. And I think, you know, it's brilliant, and you all have access to the calculator that some great people at Group M produced and I gave to the IPA, that obviously works at a channel level, so we can see, you know, when you run your campaigns through them before you kick off, what emissions you will be emitting at a channel level. I think as we get more sophisticated in channels, or we're using different partners, you know, we need to start to think about kind of a more granular understanding of the activities that we're putting out there, and that's what we spend a lot of time talking about with Danone.
And it's hard, right? It's hard because we haven't thought of this in the past, and we haven't really thought about the consequences of our digital emissions, so to speak. And we've been doing this a lot with physical, we've been doing this a lot with actual, you know, paper creative or other formats like that. That's been a massive topic, and we've actually eliminated a lot of that. We've replaced it with digital, and we've also seen the massive expansion of personalization, which has actually created a lot more work. And of course, there's a whole stream that goes into that. So it's not just displaying the work, it's the work required before that, before you get to that point. Production, emails back and forth, and people have this concept that emails are you know, completely sustainable, but they're not, and they still have to have servers, they still have to have infrastructure. And as head of technology, and I don't want to geek out a little bit too much, but we're looking at some really interesting stuff. So moving to the cloud was just the first step.
Sure.
But actually now there's this concept of sustainable clouds. So you might have heard of deep sea data centers, you might have heard of Arctic data centers, so where we can actually run the servers that power the cloud, because it's, of course, that there is no such thing as a cloud, there's just physical banks of servers. And how can we actually invest in the right technology to drive that sustainability from the outset? So that's the building block. And then there's the people layer on top, which is how do we get people to start thinking about, you know, we have this thing at the bottom of emails, I'm sure some of you have seen that, you know, think before you print this email. You know, there really should be a think before you send this email, because there's a bigger picture that we just haven't really tuned into yet.
Yeah, there's a stat that we are quite fascinated about, we keep on talking about, that's like something like for every 30 emails that we send, it's the same as leaving a light bulb on for 24 hours. You know, and you think about how many emails we're sending day in, day out, and we think we're being really clever not printing stuff out or posting stuff, when actually we're just generating more and more carbon emissions through the digital footprint.
Yeah, and how do you hold each other to account in this, and how more generally, how can brands partner with agencies, etc., to hold each other to account?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's our job to make each other aware.
Okay.
And I think, you know, that's what, you know, the carbon calculator gets talked a lot about in this industry, and, you know, because it's the first sort of thing that we've done that's systematically something that we can all look at. And I think what's brilliant about it is it raises the awareness. So it gives you choices by simply allowing you to see what your plan will do from an emissions point of view, and whether you choose to offset that, which is something that we are, you know, at Wavemaker, our clients are opting in to, they have to opt out of not offsetting, but we need to start to reduce. And the first step to that is just being aware of stuff. And then I think it's pushing it a bit further and maybe trying to get ahead of the activity, so it's less about the reporting piece. But for example, we're just putting all our people through and then working with clients on a Change the Brief programme. And so we're getting right at the top of it and making sure that sustainability is part of the media brief as much as sort of the broader kind of messaging or brand or product brief. And I think, you know, that awareness and that discussion is the important thing, because then we can do something about it.
Yeah. And I assume this isn't all from the goodness of your hearts. What's the business impact of more sustainable approach?
Well, I mean, consumers are more tuned into this, and there's going to be a tipping point where the digital waste that we're emitting starts to get quantified. You know, some of these stats we've been throwing around, they're little known stats, they're kind of edgy. There's another one about the refrigerator. Somebody was telling me, one of our colleagues, that watching, I think it was an hour of streaming video equates to the same energy as running a refrigerator for 2 years. I mean, this is stuff that will eventually work its way around to common knowledge. And at the exact point it does, suddenly businesses will be on the back foot and businesses and brands on the back foot thinking, how do we do this? How do we deal with this? And that's what I mean about now is the time to act, because it gives us the ability of being thought leaders rather than just following and scrambling around, much like a lot of companies did during the whole sustainability piece and the kind of evolution of it over the last 10 years. So, so what's in it for us is perception. Is actually that we're a thought leader, that we're telling our consumers, hey, you should be aware of this. This is going to be the next big thing. And by fostering that, then absolutely it creates a link in their mind that these guys know what they're talking about. These guys have the credentials. They're not just going away and getting certified, but they're also delivering on what they talk about.
And as Kelly, as an agency, how do you sell this into brands who maybe aren't as proactive as Danone?
Yeah, I don't think we have to sell it in.
Yeah.
I don't think there are many people that see this as something that we shouldn't be taking responsibility for. But you're right, there is a lot of discussion around the kind of balance of profitability and sustainability. I mean, there's loads of studies around to show the benefits of kind of purpose-based marketing, and then there's lots of naysayers that say that it doesn't do anything in the short term. I think the thing that we should all be thinking about is it goes beyond us, right? It's a much bigger thing that we need to be thinking about, and we all love this planet, and at the end of the day, if we don't do some stuff now, then it won't exist for generations beyond. And I think the brands like Danone that can innovate and can think earlier about it will get ahead of the curve, and they will get ahead of things like legislation and taxes that will at some point just come smacking down on all of us. And so, you know, I think, you know, that's our job to kind of not sell it in, but again, make them aware, discuss things with them. And you know, I think it was Deloitte or PwC did a bit of work as well, and this will be probably front of mind for lots of people in this room when we think about the whole Great Resignation. I know it was on the agenda yesterday, the whole sort of talent crunch, the discussion around that. But Deloitte did some work that for brands that are very open and have very strong sort of sustainability values, they're seeing a reduction of between 25 and 50% in their employee churn. Who doesn't want that at the moment? So I think, you know, it does go beyond just sort of what you're doing from a brand perspective.
And can you just tell me a little bit about why this is so important to Danone as well? Because I've seen online that you've got wider sustainability goals, this push to 2030. So can you just tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, as part of the B Corp certification, we had to have these in place, but we had them in place anyway. And yes, absolutely, this whole idea of being net zero by 2030, this is just one of the many initiatives that we're getting after. Honestly, though, we haven't started articulating what success in digital reduction looks like, because this is new for everybody. So at the moment, we're really trying to figure out what is this going to mean for us in the long term? What kind of objectives should we be setting ourselves to and holding ourselves accountable to? But I mean, for us as Danone, we've always had this kind of dual purpose. So we've always had, there was a famous speech in 1972 with one of our founders, and he basically really rocked the world at the time by saying it's a company's, should be their absolute mission to have a dual purpose around being entrepreneurial, delivering great results, but also delivering back to the society they're part of. So that's been a really core part of how Danone operates for the longest time. And it's really helped with things like retention and being able to again, be that kind of place to work where you feel as though you're working for not only healthy brands, but also sustainable brands.
It's something you guys are really proud, like the B Corp status is something that comes up in a lot of discussions. It's something that kind of is really far-reaching across the employee base at Danone, which I think is fabulous. And
it's a big deal.
Definitely pays back. Yeah.
It's a big deal for, like I said, a business our size, because normally you'd find a lot of small to medium-sized brands and individual brands really getting behind B Corp.
Well, most, it's something like 90% of brands, or sort of, don't quote me on that exact figure, please, are small, medium enterprises, right? So at Danone's scale, you'd think it's challenging to implement.
Yeah, and you have to renew it every couple of years as well. Yeah. So you're kind of constantly being checked on your credibility and your status. It's not something you can kind of win and then, you know, it's not like Ofsted from a schooling perspective where you just sort of hope you don't get looked at again. It's something they have to keep doing. And we were talking about this earlier, but I think the digital credentials, as the myths get bust and we sort of look at the kind of emissions from digital, that will start to become a much bigger part of what people need to do to get B Corp status.
And this is a conversation you're having with a lot of clients at the moment. And is that being built into the media plan now? Yeah,
so our approach is very much that it's a systematic one. So, you know, our belief at Wavemaker is that this is something that isn't an option. You know, the awareness of your carbon footprint is important, and then the discussion around what we do about that carbon footprint is a super important one. So all of the plans that our clients get have a carbon emissions status, and then the cost of what it will cost them to to offset that, and then obviously we start to talk about how we can reduce it too.
So we're coming to the end of this session now. I just wanted to get an idea for what the plans are next. How you take it. This is obviously an ongoing process, right? We had, so yesterday, I don't know how many of you were in the room for it. We had a climate scientist come and speak at the event, and she said, this is a problem we have to address now.
Yeah.
It needs addressing now.
Yeah.
So obviously it is ongoing. This is something that you're dealing with now. It's a long-term plan, up to 2030. What's the big next steps?
The long-term plan is to integrate everything we've been talking about today into our 2030 plan to really start building this digital awareness, because it's not there. And I said we're at the beginning of that journey. We're starting to really to feel out what our consumers would expect, but also what we should be delivering to the society we're part of. And there's lots of things we've been doing over the years outside of the traditional physical sustainability space, but really we're just starting the journey. So for us, it's build it into the plan, hold ourselves accountable, and make sure that, like I said, when customers come and knock in, that we're going to be able to say, this is why we're doing it, this is the importance of digital sustainability, and this is what you can do as a consumer to help us. Because I think there's a dual purpose there as well, which is saying, let's upskill our consumers, because the consumers are the ones consuming the content, consuming the media, digesting the ads. It's about understanding for them as well to create that kind of sustainable thinking space.
Yeah, it's refreshing to see as well there's a huge amount of discourse about personal decisions that you can make, but to see it on such a large-scale business making changes too, and it not all being on the individual consumer to make the change, I think is an incredibly important thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's been absolutely lovely speaking to you both today. Thank you so much for coming down, and a round of applause.
Thank you very much.